Good morning, good afternoon, or good evening, depending on where you are in the world, and welcome to today's DevOps.com webinar, brought to you by Techstrong. My name is Cody J. Brown. I'm the host of Techstrong Learning. We have an exciting panel ahead of us, but first I have just a couple of housekeeping notes. First, today's session is being recorded, so if you miss any of our discussion or you'd like to rewatch or share with a friend, the on-demand recording will be made available shortly after we conclude our live webinar today. If you have any questions for our speakers, we want you to direct those to the Q&A tab on the right side of the screen. And that's also where you'll find our chat tab, where you can engage with the rest of your audience members and discuss with our speakers and help lead our discussion today. Finally, at the conclusion of our webinar, we will be giving away 4 $25 Amazon gift cards, so be sure to stick around. Our topic today is the impact of low-code, no-code on DevOps, and I'm joined today by Marcus Torres, GM and VP of App Engine Business at ServiceNow, Daniel Topham, Solution Architect at xMatters, an Everbridge company, and Mike Vizard, Chief Content Officer here at Techstrong Group. So to the three of you, thank you so much for being here with me. I'll give the floor over to Mike to get our conversation started.
All right, thank you. Hey, Marcus, let's start with you for a minute. Can you maybe level set this conversation a bit for us? Because we've been talking about low code, no code tools for a long time. I think back in the day, we used to call them rapid access development tools, RAD tools for short. So what's changing now? What's driving this whole low code, no code movement? Is there something fundamentally different in the landscape?
Well, good to see you again, Mike. I think there are two fundamental things that are happening, and one, of course, is a theme you've heard a lot of the last few years. But with COVID, it was a push to agility for businesses all over the world. They had to figure out how to connect with their customers in a different way, and what they found is without that centralized sort of support system, if you will, that was at some point physical. They really had to respond to the agility of business. And if you couple that with the workforce changing, everyone just having to some degree a little bit more technical aptitude, or of course, an appetite for amazing experiences that they have throughout their lives, this is what really is changing the way people want to engage with their employees, with their partners, with their customers in a different way. And low code provides people a way to do that with the agility that their business needs, with experiences that they want. And of course, the sort of empowerment of being able to do that on their own is really a big aspect of what's driving a lot of this in a completely different scale than we've seen over the last 10, 20 years of sort of the promise of low code. It's actually much more a reality today. That's what I'm seeing.
Yeah. And we tend to throw these two terms out all the time. We say low code, no code, as if they're one and the same. But is there a subtle difference between what we consider low code versus what we consider no code?
In my mind, there is a difference, and it usually comes down to, what how far people are really trying to kind of build or transform their workforce or their process with some of these tools. Generally with no code, the way I generally see it is they're really going away from this sort of spreadsheet. I'm managing my work through a bunch of spreadsheets, and I'm taking it from a spreadsheet to usually they start with a form, and they have some basic kind of logic or automation behind it. But what people start to realize when they become these creators, where they start actually digitizing some of these processes, is, wow, now I really want it to do X, Y, Z. And sometimes that's where they need to go to quote unquote low code because they're trying to actually improve it even further. And that's awesome because they're learning more skills. Or, I think low code, no code is also a team sport. They start to pull in other people that have different expertise across their organization, either from different departments that have sort of a different, set of operations or tasks that they manage or processes they manage, or they're pulling in folks that have certain skills that they don't understand, and they're really kind of pulling them in and making an amazing transformation really as a team and not just as an individual where and I think generally no code in sort of the spreadsheet to a form tends to be very much on my own or in my own department. It's not 100% true, but in general, I would say those are the sort of trends.
Yeah. Just to kind of add on to what you're saying, I think I agree 100% with, they are very much different, and no code is kind of, I picture just this box that whatever the no code, it fits a very specific use case or use cases, and that's kind of where it sits in that box, and it does it very, very well. And so where low code comes in, you want to take what you've done inside that box and maybe enhance it or open it up a little bit. And that's where you start to have that kind of team build environment that Marcus, you kind of mentioned, which I really enjoy. So yeah, absolutely.
So guys, who's building these apps? Because Marcus mentioned team sport, and we hear the phrase citizen developer a lot. And yet, in my experience so far, it's mainly professional developers who are using these tools, and some business folks that have some level of technical acumen maybe, but the bulk of these applications are being generated by who? So-called citizen developers or professional developers? Marcus, you start.
Yeah, well, I think the term citizen development is almost like saying what is an app. Everyone has their own view on what that is exactly. At the end of the day, what I think of low code or no code tooling is how do you enable people of all skill sets to really drive the outcome, the business outcome they're going after. And that business outcome is, hey, I want to transform or digitize or automate part of my work or part of an experience, or create an amazing new experience for myself, for my department, for my employees, for my organization, for my customers. And what I'm generally seeing is there is essentially lines of business that are saying, I need people that are more technical that can do what we need to support our various line of business, right? Whether that's finance or legal or marketing or IT. And IT has traditionally had this in the sense of they have an app dev team, there's a COE, and IT is incredibly important to ensuring people's overall success when you have a broader citizen developer program, right? They're really sort of the guidance, the team providing like, hey, if you go there, you're going to fall off the cliff, right? Or, they're sort of providing that level of partnership and support. And I think that's what's really different about citizen development these days is you have people of varying skill sets, let's call it that way, who are creating, who are building. And, whether it's a COE within IT or kind of, the app dev function, what they're really providing is the right governance and guardrails so that people are successful over time. Because otherwise you have some of the same challenges that have existed in low code and no code for the last 20 years. Things like app sprawl, shadow IT, all of these things that essentially are a result of people's good intentions, but now has no way to scale within the organization. If you actually do it as a team sport and it's partnership, right? With folks that have been doing this for 20 years as a core practice, they can provide the right level of kind of guidance that really helps everyone be successful. And that's what we've seen, with our customers is really coming at this in a sense of partnership and as a team sport. And they've been wildly successful. Because citizen developer to them is, hey, you're someone in the business who, isn't working off some app dev backlog, but working on your key initiatives, and you need to be successful. And part of success is fitting into the practices and the methodologies that can really scale with the business.
Dang, are you seeing citizen developers in the pipeline? What's going on?
I was going to actually mention that really anybody and everybody could use, low code, no code type of tools, because everybody has initiatives. Everybody has certain things that they need to do, and the last thing that they want to do is to get, interrupted or even be worrying about those, like, oh, I need to learn JavaScript, or I need to learn Python, or whatever it is, those skills to even help me do my work. And so these kind of platforms help really anyone drive those initiatives or processes forward, so that it gives them time back to actually do what they need to do in their everyday, work. I feel like this has really, changed dramatically, because really in the development world, or even developing something like this, you need to know someone who knows someone, like a developer, and you need to be like, hey, Bob sent me over to your desk because he told me you could whip me up this app that I need help with, or whatever. And of course, Bob's got other stuff on his plate and being interrupted. So these kind of tools are really gluing the organization, whether it be, some, system admin or somebody with no development skills, all the way up to, even the developers that could take advantage of these low code, no code type of environments or tools.
So Daniel, is that changing the pipeline as we've known it all these years, where it was full of projects written in procedural code of various flavors, and now are we seeing something that's a new animal in the pipeline? And what's the impact of that kind of thing on the pipeline?
Well, I think when it comes to creating services for the organization, and submitting those changes and services through the pipeline, that you can see, especially nowadays, if you, with everybody with their digital transformation or their DevOps transformation, like, it's all about going faster, quicker, stronger, whatever adjective you want to throw in there. So those kind of changes really, without a kind of a low code, no code environment helping with that really not negates it, but it slows down that agility that Mark has kind of talked to, with pushing those new services, of course, to beat your competitor, or and coming out with the latest and greatest feature in an app, or something like that. Yeah.
Well, I think what you see with low code and no code is the success stories. There's tons of applications created. Not all of them are successful. Guess what? That's development. If anyone's done development, not every feature, not every product's been successful. But for the ones that are, especially for citizen developers, which again I define as anyone who's really trying to create an application to support their line of business outcome. Again, you don't have to be super technical, or you could be actually technical, but you're really kind of driving towards this business outcome within line of business. What they're seeing is, when they have success, they all of a sudden have to understand things that they didn't really probably count on. For example, one of the biggest costs of building software is maintenance. You don't think of that as this line of business developer. You're like, hey, I created this app, it was really successful. All of a sudden, guess what? That line of business or your partner departments are like, well, can you add this? And can you add this? And what about this integration? And hey, can you? And they're just like, whoa, wait, I created version 1. I didn't know I had to create 8 more versions. And when it's also successful, things like security and compliance and regulations come in to ensure that your data is successful and in a secure way for your business. We've seen the headlines of some of the largest kind of low code platforms, and a citizen developer opens up a piece of data to the entire world, right? That is why it's really important that it's really this partnership model, right? There's been this, if you talk to CIOs and leaders of IT, they don't want to be the department and know. They want to enable lines of business to be successful, but they understand success just isn't delivery and then it stops. but security and maintenance and compliance, so that that never becomes the department of no. And the easiest way to get there is you allow an application to go out that violates security, that violates, customer trust. And guess what? Then that's when citizen development really comes to a very quick stop, right? Because then it's like, shut them all down, make sure we're not, doing anything that goes against our security for the rest of the company. And we've seen those as big headline examples within low code and no code. And that's why it's really important that what you really provide is a platform that gives not only guidance, but creates hard guardrails based on the rules and the regulations and the needs of the business, but still empowers everybody to be successful. And that takes, there's part of that that's product, that's part of that that's process, but there's overall change and overall cultural change. And what I see, that's sort of the evolution that a lot of businesses are under to really be successful at this. It's sort of their own adoption journey of low code and no code within their organization, which, ties pretty close to, hey, this is how we ship software as a business, kind of DevOps methodologies. How do we do that, in a way that still supports low code and no code?
Daniel, on that point, we may see a day where, I don't know, more than half the applications that are flowing through the DevOps environment are low code, no code projects. Is there best advice in your mind about how to integrate that? I mean, are there certain best practices I should be thinking about today that kind of lend themselves to doing that at scale? Because I think a lot of folks would look at that and say, I'm barely getting by with what I have today, and now you're going to increase my pipeline. So how do I kind of cope with that?
Well, it's a great question. I guess one thing to keep in mind is I would probably always be open. I've always said the only constant thing in life is change. And so when it comes to implementing these no code, low code type of tools, it's really, you might have a little bit of pain now, but it will save you more time in the long run, even though, you're trying to get by, currently. But I think with these low code, no code tools, that it's inevitable that really that you need to be agile and to be able to support the business. And these are the types of tools that will help you get there. I'm not sure if that is that.
Well, maybe I have a slightly different view. I'm not sure. Maybe I have a slightly different view. Let me give it a shot. I think it is clear that the demands on the business are outpacing, the number of quote unquote, professional or real developers you have to address them. That's why the backlogs keep getting bigger. And if we're going to empower people to create and build these applications, guess what? We can't make them successful unless we have a platform and a tool that meets them where they are. Going and saying, hey, you have to go and, become this, expert in this platform and learn all kinds of skill sets. Some people will do that, and they'll do that successfully and have done that successfully on a number of platforms. But if you really want to do it at scale, you have to meet them where they're at, have them be able to build in a way that they just understand, right? And I think more in technology and AI and ML and, process mining, all the things are helping to provide that level of ease when it comes to digitizing and automating and transforming their experience. Now, I think when we start talking about all of these low code, no code applications also having to adhere to DevOps principles, I think DevOps has to be done in a citizen developer way, where you still have all of the source code and the CI/CD and all of the pipelines that you have in the back, but it's obfuscated or abstracted for the citizen developer. So if you have a platform that, hey, when I create an application, they don't know, but in the background, it creates a Git repo, anything that they do ends up getting, tracked and committed within source control. When they say, hey, I think I'm done with this application, I want to, try to publish it, that it goes through a set of automated testing or rule checks based on the needs of the business. I think the citizen developer, I will tell you, I'll guarantee you, citizen developer will never figure out Git. It's not going to happen. It's impossible because even professional developers have sometimes trouble figuring out how to, what's going on with Git when they do a PR, right? So what I would say is, that's where there's an opportunity to really have a citizen DevOps approach where they just know it is, hey, I created an app, I'm building that application, I've submitted it, it goes through a couple stages that I understand, like, hey, I tested it in development, it's going to go here to some place where we can test it with, broader user acceptance testing. Those kind of things they would understand and can understand and will actually start to really appreciate, right? How many of those platforms out there where any citizen developer can basically create an app, publish it like that second? They love the speed of that, but as soon as something's wrong, they're like, wait, how do I got to stop it? Okay, now I'm getting escalations by XYZ. I think that is what they're trying to avoid. But at the same time, we can't expect them to understand all of these more technical principles of DevOps. We need a way for them to adhere to DevOps in a way that just sort of matches their citizen development. And I think that's the opportunity, within this space, and something that at least we're focused on here quite a bit.
Mm-hmm. Daniel, what do you think of that? Because we in the DevOps community have been complaining about the heavy lift involved with DevOps platforms for years. And so maybe, to Marcus's point, are we going to see the arrival of low-code, no-code tools kind of force a conversation about the abstraction of the DevOps platforms itself, and we're going to lift this whole thing up at a higher level, and maybe it just becomes more accessible to everybody? You don't have to be an SRE necessarily to be enjoying the benefits of DevOps, right?
Yeah, I mean, that's the kind of the underlying key of this whole DevOps movement is, bringing developers that develop great services, that have those development skills to be able to have those operational citizen developers be able to help support those services. And I think Marcus kind of nailed it right on the head as far as being able to, have those no-code, low-code type applications do the underlying bits in Git or whatever actions that it needs to do, but the citizen developer doesn't necessarily need to know all of that. But I guess I agree.
Marcus, we've been having this ongoing debate about DevOps versus traditional IT service management for the better part of a decade. Maybe if the DevOps has been around for a decade, we've been having this debate for one day less than a decade, right? Do you think, to your point, though, if we start managing these things at a higher level of abstraction, it will be easier to meld DevOps and traditional ITSM together in a way that creates something maybe larger than the whole? And what might that look like?
Well, I don't think, I don't know if I equate ITSM and DevOps as the same thing, right? I see, IT and IT service management is really as a way of supporting any number of centralized services across an organization. DevOps, in my mind, is a way of creating the right framework and methodology and rigor so that you can scale with your development across the organization. I understand sort of the association, but when you look at whether it's low code tooling, no code tooling, DevOps, all what it's really trying to do is help scale this given practice in a broader way that supports that scale across your entire workforce. And to me, I think everything about no code and low code is an abstraction of really powerful technologies and capabilities that traditional developers used to develop on, right? DevOps didn't really exist until developers were like, I'm spending all of this time having to deal with some of these challenges. Okay, let's create a methodology, let's create some tools. And as a previous developer and a crappy developer hobbyist at times today, when I still go in and try to approach it, what ends up happening is even sometimes I get stuck. I'm like, wait, I'm stashing something. I can't figure out how to merge this back. The whole thing can be intense to some degree. Like what technology has done forever, has always been to really make things that were hard and complicated and start to make them easier, abstract them, make them more usable by the mass. I think the same thing's going to be true about DevOps. It doesn't take away from the rigor and the discipline that needs to be in there, but do it in a way that more people can consume it or adopt it without necessarily having to understand all the underpinnings. And I think that's exactly what's needed to ensure that we don't have, runaway shadow IT that basically has been that way for, a couple decades anyways. And provide the right level of monitoring, optimization, scale, automation that's going to be needed when you have, 500 million more apps, which I believe some of the analyst firms have said is going to, in the next few years, which way eclipses the amount of apps that exist today. Now, of course, we can sit there and debate what's an app, but to the everyday, user, the everyday employee, what they're really trying to say is this is a tool I use to do part of my job. At the end of the day, that's an app, right? And so how can we allow them to create more of that in the right way and to really scale? Because if we don't, guess what? We'll just have the same app sprawl and the same problems that we've had for probably the last decade or two.
Daniel, do you agree with that? Are we on the cusp of some new era that we might not recognize till we're 2 years into it?
Possibly, but yeah, I do agree with what Marcus has said. Yeah.
All right. What going back to core DevOps tenets, right? So observability is a core tenet, and generally speaking, we've achieved some form of continuous monitoring over the years, but now we're talking about new observability platforms, the ability to actually query these applications and look at something more interesting than just a bunch of static metrics. So do you think that we'll be able to observe all these applications with these different abstractions, and what kind of challenges might that bring forward? Daniel, do you think that, or some people are just saying this whole observability thing is just overhyped to begin with, but what's your thought process about how will we achieve observability across all these different applications in these pipelines?
Well, you need observability in order to be better in all of your different points of, developing these services. So what you need to do is, kind of take a pulse of, okay, we've come in, we're doing this thing, and this is where we need to get better, and you've got this kind of like value stream mapping, if you will, of everything that, okay, we need to work better on here. And without that observability, you're not able to take that pulse or even know the stats or whatever it is to get better at your sticking points when it comes to, hey, we're spending too much time doing X, Y, and Z. And I mean, that's what, without that, yeah, we're not able to scale or focus on the right things for the organization.
Marcus, how are we going to achieve observability? I'm sure you got some thoughts here.
Well, I think observability is become the next like stage wagon that sells tonic water. And I don't mean that it doesn't work or it's not necessary. But if you go back 5 years ago, 6 years ago, RPA was going to automate everything from like cooking in the kitchen to every process in your enterprise. And it was really, it's in many cases is it was leveraged where you could just do a standard API integration, but it was leveraged instead. Now, if you look at observability and mining, all the things that are happening, it's absolutely necessary in the sense of you need observability to get the bigger picture into the business. But I also see it being pitched as sort of the tonic to every ailment you have. The reality is you really need a broad platform that has a broad set of capabilities that can do things like automations, observability, digitization, integration, intelligence, like learning. You need that broader platform to actually achieve the outcome you're looking for, because it's not every problem in your business is a nail and you just have a hammer. It's like when you do any sort of renovation project on your home or anything else, you need a myriad of tools to really achieve the outcome you're looking for. And observability is key to having the insight or to understanding what problems exist and how big that problem may be. Maybe it's not even a problem, just, hey, this is what's happening in the business. This is the scale in which it's happening. Where do I need to start looking in that overall, process to then, look at how to improve this, how to transform it. But we can't keep coming up with, say, just the next thing and assume it's going to solve all of our problems. We really need to look at the entire picture, which is to some degree what DevOps, from a methodology is trying to do. But we have to realize it's a combination of these tools coming together to provide that outcome, and it's not just this next piece that's going to give us this magical like awakening and be able to solve all of our problems. Hopefully, I'm curious what you guys think.
Dan, you want to add to that or any thoughts?
No, not right now.
Good. Well, we do have a question from somebody in the audience who wants to know about security, and a little backdrop on that is we've been all talking about shifting more responsibility for security left. And in some cases, that means all the way out to the developer. In some cases, it means just kind of leaning left and doing more automation, and we'll see how that goes. But I guess the question I would ask, and I'll throw this to Daniel first, is that with professional developers, we worry that they don't have the security expertise required to build these applications securely in the first place. And now we're asking citizen developers to build applications who have even less security expertise than the professional developers. So, might we be on the road here to we're our own worst enemy here, because we're just going to be making more insecure applications faster. So how do we need to think about this?
Well, I think a lot of these systems, I don't know, I kind of see it both ways. The one way is these no-code, low-code type applications should have parameters built in, right? To the point of being able to have it secure, do what you need to do, whether it be through roles and permissions or whatever that may be. It's not just, here's a new tool that falls into your lap and you can tap into any sort of data or, person or whatever that may be. So assuming that was implemented, correctly, that's kind of where I see, whether it's, make this certain API call into a system, and whether it's like, open season to just go and grab that data, or if it's you need permission to see that data, right? And so that's kind of where it should be. Of course, if it's not implemented correctly, or the permissionings or the roles or whatever that may be, being able to just go the wild, wild west to go and grab whatever data and have that security, kind of security breach, if you will. I see that it's kind of a good thing, but at the same time, if it's not correctly implemented, then it could also be a bad thing. But I don't know. What do you think, Marcus?
At the end of the day, the second you lose the trust of your customer by, and the trust of your customer, the trust of your enterprise by having a data breach, that's when things really slow down, right? That's when you go back to kind of the traditional, rigid processes that don't allow lines of business to be agile and to respond to their needs in real time. And so I truly believe that when it comes to data, you have to secure it, and you have to be on a platform that says, hey, if you're trying to get to order information in your ERP system, guess what? That's not just, hey, I give you a role and you can do whatever you want, right? You want to go to an HR system because you're just trying to get some employee birth dates, right? For a low-code application to send happy birthday automation cards, right? Guess what? I'm not giving you access to, Workday or SuccessFactors or other systems that now you can start looking at, compensation information. And these are the things that are really important, that when you have these low-code and no-code platforms, that they actually, there is governance, there is a hard guardrail, there is a wall, between what you are trying to do versus what you could do in any aspect. And some platforms out there, what they essentially ask you to do is just replicate everything, right? Like, go create your own, recreate all of this data somewhere else in this low-code platform. Others simply say, here's an integration. Well, what's putting the guardrails behind that integration, right? A lot of integrations, unless it's, essentially your personalized, you're using your own authentication, which already has those roles restricted typically. What they're doing is they're giving like an API access that you can get to anything. That's not okay. So you really need to have the right, like, strict guardrails in this. And even if you have that, what you want is, once that application is being tested and or being published or wanting to be published, that you can do checks on that. So automated checks. This goes beyond security. This is security, performance, a number of different areas that we could talk about when it comes to application life cycles, where in application best practices, where you want things to be checked. Guess what? You're not generally going to do that with, or can do that with, no-code platforms that basically do better spreadsheets, right? You need more sophisticated platforms that allow you to establish these kinds of automated checks, these kind of governance and guardrails that are also configurable and customizable to your business. And when you do that, I think that's when you can start to really trust this kind of development at scale, because otherwise a security breach brings it to a strong halt.
Well, Marcus, let me add to that a little bit then, because security is only one issue, right? There's tons of things that developers need some guidelines for. So how smart will these platforms get? We hear about AI everywhere we go, but can I get to the point where the platform just makes it so that I can't make a common mistake, whether it's a security issue one or a performance issue one or compliance or whatever it might be?
The marketing messages, of course, like AI, ML, it's going to solve for everything you need. But remember, like, machine learning is pretty stupid if you don't have the data to feed it, like good practices, right? And so, and it's a chicken and egg thing, right? If you don't have enough data, enough examples of good practices versus bad practices, what is AI really going to do for you that's going to solve for things like security? Now, AI and ML will say, hey, you're trying to grab customer information. guess what? Maybe you want to talk to your CRM system. Like that's an easy one, right? Like that's a common pattern. But in your CRM system, what data can you grab? Can you not grab? What, hey, are you performing an operation that, isn't going to perform or has a scale? Like those are things that I don't think AI and ML have the right amount of data to really nail that today. There's somebody out there and some company that's going to say they solved it, but the reality is they need the data to solve it, right? And so what we see in sort of low code and no code is truly that hybrid approach, right? Using AI and ML to do things like recommended next action, oh, it looks like you probably need an approval here. Could you use an integration to X? But it's really that hybrid approach of having people and experts that put up certain guardrails, that do certain automated checks, that apply certain principles to how you create, publish, and then eventually deploy that application, that really gives people the security that they need to feel like this can scale in a way that supports both the needs of the business from a security and a compliance and a performance perspective, as well as the agility that the business needs to react.
Daniel, do you agree with that? Is there too much AI washing going on out there? Everybody seems to say I've got some form of AI in my platform, but the reality of it is it's like, and if this, then that statement, and that's about as far as it gets.
Yeah, that I've definitely seen kind of the loosey-goosey use of ML, AI. Yeah, we've got it. But once you kind of peel the onion back, if you will, a lot of times it's just, rules-based, whether it's, like some sort of, like what Marcus mentioned with, oh, you might want to tap into your CRM for this kind of data or something like that. That's not really intelligence. That's just, oh, this kind of data typically goes into a CRM, that sort of thing. But but it's a behemoth of a topic, and it's definitely a tough nut to crack when it comes to this sort of thing, because a lot of times you think you have all this data, but is it the right kind of data? Is it clean data? Is it duplicative data? Like what? And then at that point, you're just shoving all this non-really valuable data at it, and so it will give you it'll give you something, but it might not be as valuable as you think it is. And so, that's kind of in the middle of where we're at today, I'm sure.
Marcus, how will low-code, no-code tools evolve? Because we do see a lot of speech interfaces these days, and we're seeing guardrails, and things are getting smarter. So can I have this kind of like, Jean-Luc Picard moment where I just say, make it so, and the thing will just write me an app? Or what does the future look like?
Well, you use Jean-Luc Picard, and I use the Iron Man reference typically, and Jarvis, who doesn't like Jarvis, right? But I do think if you look at what we've had for, at least a decade now, we've had a lot of this, speech, voice recognition, or kind of speech to answer, speech to text. I do think that technology, it doesn't have to be low code, no code tools only, but I think technology is going to evolve where I am using my voice to not only get answers, but to start essentially getting visualizations and kind of creation of what I'm asking for. We've seen that with, NLQ, and, I'm a driver report or a dashboard based on what I'm simply asking, right? I think visualizations will be an evolution of technology today. It's definitely the hardest thing to do in general, is to create, amazing, UI experiences just by describing it outside dashboards, which is pretty common today. But I do think that'll be an evolution. The reality is, whether you go back 20 years ago to 2 weeks ago, when you're sitting with a bunch of folks around a room and you start describing what you need, people describe it in words. They say, hey, this is what I'm trying to accomplish. This is what I'm doing. And in the past, and even today, but definitely in the past, you'd have people that are experts that understood that what you were describing means XYZ. It means a certain data model. It means a certain UI. It means a certain UI technology. It means a certain, kind of business logic that they would have to build. And technology over time is abstracted more and more and more of that, right? Now I could take a spreadsheet and automatically create a data model. I could, describe something, and, people know that might be, oh, okay, that's a custom website, or no, it's, just this simple form that you need, right? That I need to surface. And I think technology will continue to evolve to allow people to do more and more of that, with words instead of with code or declarative buttons or dragging and dropping. I do think when it comes to creation and kind of application, custom applications, a human's always going to want to tweak and kind of move what they need and kind of make it their own experience. So I don't know if it'll technically be the Jarvis that you see in movies or the Jean-Luc Picard per se, but it it'll help them get there and actually start to really imagine what they could do by providing them certain initial kind of blueprints of what it is they're looking to achieve.
Daniel, do you think as we go forward that procedural code is going to disappear entirely over time, or are we going to have a set of applications that lend themselves more to procedural code, or is it going to be this hybrid kind of thing where I've got low code, no code tools, but then I drop out of that to go use procedural code underneath that for something that's particularly challenging, and I need a DevOps workflow that kind of supports that flexibility?
Yeah. In my opinion, it's definitely going to be hybrid. This is actually an example that comes to mind is, I talk within the IT kind of organization with many people, and the knee-jerk reaction is, oh, I can automate like 98% of my job or whatever. And on the very, very surface, it sounds good, but as soon as you start to think about it, it's like, no, that's impossible to really automate, 100% of all of these things that you need to do. You'll always have that human element. And so when it comes to this hybrid, kind of no code, low code to the traditional, writing up an application, there is that kind of balance between them to where you'll still need human beings to, write up or maybe even expand or enhance what's already there from a no code, low code perspective. You kind of take it and run with it as your kind of foundation that you've built, and then build on top of that when it comes to like the traditional, execution of code or writing and that sort of thing. So that's my 2 cents.
I think, I'm with Daniel. Procedural code, real develop, or not real, that's probably not the right term, but the professional developer is never going away. Code is never going away. And I think developers, of all skill sets, but developers are the artists of the digital age, right? They're really, and don't get me on some nonsense of NFT. Somebody out there is getting mad at me right now. I'm going to send me a tweet. But it truly is developers are the artists of the digital age. And I think the Leonardos are the professional developers. They can really come in and they can sculpt and they can build and they can architect and they can do all of these amazing things that it takes years and discipline and that to master that craft. No low code, no code tool is going to replicate that or replace it. Now, those low code and no code tools provide great ways for sort of apprenticeship, right? In many ways, to like, hey, I have a problem. Let me start to solve it. I solve it. And guess what? Some of the developers I know that have been super successful with their careers, literally going from an office manager to a CTO, is because they took no low-code tooling. They started to understand technology in a different way than they did before as a consumer, and really as a builder, as a creator. And then they built sort of their expertise over time, and to the point where they truly became, an expert, not of just no low-code tooling, but an expert of technology, because they had passion for understanding how to leverage this technology as a builder. And they eventually became a quote unquote pro developer and led their career. And what I would say is, like, procedural code is not going away. And guess what? Low and no code tooling is also not going away. And so we are in a world that is a team sport, that it is about coexistence. And I actually think, I'm going to go back to different technologies across time here. Guess what? Like, everyone has moved to either infrastructure as a service, platform as a service, low code tooling, no code tooling. Even if you are technical enough to do it all from scratch, I can rack a server, I can set up, my own database, I can do all those things, or I can press a button. And if I can press a button as a professional developer all the way to a no-code developer, and it's going to give me speed towards my outcome faster, I'm going to use it. And then when I know I need to write a bunch of code to do something very sophisticated, I have the ability to do that, I'm going to do that 100%. But I'm not going to decide, oh, you know what, I'm going to do nothing but code because, like, it's a pride thing. I just want to go faster. That's it. And so if you provide me the right tools to go faster, I'm going to use it. There was a old developer platform that went bananas. And all it did was it allowed for deployments of essentially things that you would typically find in your Maven project. Like, oh, I want this database to be installed on this, this node at a click of a button, and it's super easy. And guess what? It was millions of developers that loved it. Do they know that they can go do that in code and write that themselves? Sure, but they did it with the press of a button because it was easy. Same thing applies here. Let's allow the artists and the Leonardos to really use their craft where necessary. And for everything else, let them to help them go faster. Everyone wins.
All right. Gentlemen, Daniel, let's start with you, but what is your best advice to folks as we kind of look at where we are right now? What should they be doing now? What steps should they be taking to kind of set themselves up for success? We've been talking about ruthless automation in the land of DevOps forever. So what's different now?
Well, there's various things I would think about, but one that really comes to mind is in this kind of DevOps world. And when I say DevOps, of course, that term we could talk about for hours on end, but the methodology behind it is, all these different groups within the organization, including security and, the developers and operations and all that entails. I would say have empathy for those other teams that you are not a part of, right? So a simple example is the developers could have empathy for those operational folks that, hey, I'm creating this service and I'm handing it off over to the operational folks, and they're just trying to, keep the lights on, make sure things are up and running, while I am developing new services, and kind of, what they're going through. But also on the flip side, operational folks need to have empathy for those developers because they're trying to go faster, stronger, with all of that agility of creating those services. And sometimes the operational folks need to tap a developer on the shoulder and say, hey, your service, there's something up with your service. I know you're busy and I apologize, but you are the person that I need, and I know that for a fact, versus, tapping a whole bunch of shoulders at once, or just kind of blanketing everybody and be like, hey, I need a developer, interrupting everybody. So I think if people have more empathy for the other teams that are involved in this kind of DevOps methodology, that will make everybody win in the long run.
All right. So A, be nice, and B, figure out who it is you need to be nice to first. Marcus, what do you think? What's your best advice?
I really think that there is a fundamental value of DevOps within enterprises, because it's really about helping scale development, and that includes with low and no code tooling. I think it's not about trying to force that methodology on the organization as it is as much as partnering and basically teamwork, like meeting them where they are, saying, hey, there's a reason why we put this in place. I'm having empathy for the fact that you need to scale, to what Daniel was saying, and you need to transform, and you need to, be agile to your business. We're not asking you to do anything different. We're meeting you where you're at and just saying, like, here's the benefits of why you go through this, so that no one's caught off guard. No one wants the email from, the CTO or the CIO. No one wants the email from the CISO telling them they're out of compliance. But I do think that requires meeting people where they're at. And that means you can't go and say, hey, source control and get, and use these tools and whatever. Pick your Jenkins Circle CI that no one will figure out if you're a citizen developer. But I think it's about, choosing the right partner, putting in the right program, the right process, and the right team sport environment where these teams are working together, instead of just simply saying, hey, you must, XYZ. Because if you do that, the answer has been clear. We've seen that for the last 20 years. They're going to go off and do something completely invisible or in the shadow of what the organization really needs to scale. And that eventually bites somebody, right? And so I think, the more we kind of come together empathetically, programmatically, and as humans, then the greater outcomes. And so meet people where they're at, abstract those tools, ideally with a platform that does that automatically for you, and then treat it as a team sport. And if you do that, everybody wins. Guess what? Because central IT, they want to be the enablers and the heroes to the business. And the business wants to evolve with the speed of business and also win for their overall customers. And I think it's a win-win for everybody.
All right, guys, I promised our speakers that an hour would fly by before they realized it, and we're here. So with that, gentlemen, thank you for sharing your knowledge and your expertise. And Cody, take us home.
Well, Mike, thank you for leading our discussion. And Daniel and Marcus, thank you so much for joining us today. I'd like to remind our audience that the session was recorded. Following this webinar, you'll receive an email with a link to access the recording on demand. You'll also find it on the DevOps website at devops.com/webinars. So we do have 4 winners for 4 $25 Amazon gift cards. Our first one is Laura J. Our second winner is Renato L. Our third winner is Bhavesh S. And our fourth and final winner is Diane D. So please keep an eye on your inbox to claim your gift card. And if you don't see an email, just check your spam folder. So everyone, thank you so much for joining us today for this webinar. Please take just one extra moment to fill out our post-webinar survey, and we hope to see you at a future Techstrong Learning webinar. Everyone have a great rest of your day, and to our speakers again, thank you one more time.
Thank you.
Thanks, guys.
Thanks.